January of 2023 has been a decently busy month for gaming. We actually saw a number of high-profile game releases on that month, and two of the ones that have been making a lot of headlines lately are Hi-Fi Rush and Forspoken. On one hand, you got Hi-Fi Rush, which has garnered critical acclaim. The user scores at a whopping 9.1, and for good reason, too. This is genuinely a fantastic game, and easily an early contender for Game of the Year 2023. I've played it myself, and it's this combination of like Scott Pilgrim with Beautiful Joe, with Devil May Cry, with BPM, a little Ratchet and Clank in there, and all fused in the style of something that's reminiscent of Saturday morning cartoons. Its story and characters are really fun. Its visuals are super stylized. The way the world moves to the beat and rhythm of the internal metronome of the game, and how that applies to the combat of the game, and how everything is musically themed, and just how fun and satisfying combat feels, the unique personality that oozes through Hi-Fi Rush. All of this makes this genuinely one of the most memorable releases, and it got shadow dropped to boot. It got like no marketing whatsoever. Xbox essentially announced that the game was out today during their developer direct presentation, and it was off to the races, and word of mouth very quickly spread, which is the complete antithesis to what happened with Forspoken, a game that got tons of marketing, but the more marketing they did, the less optimistic people became about this game because it just looked rough around the edges. The dialogue and the writing really wasn't jiving with people, and then the final game actually came out, and many of people's fears were ultimately realized. The gameplay was just not compelling. The open world design is not compelling. The story is not compelling. The characters are not particularly likable. The combat has gotten compliments here and there, but there's just a lot of potential to the game's concepts that were not fully fleshed out or that were not executed properly, on top of the fact that the performance issues in this game are far too prominent for them to be tolerable. And that's for a game that doesn't particularly push the boundaries of graphics fidelity or art style. It's not the prettiest looking game either, so it's just a very mid game is the general consensus. Forspoken's reception was substandard enough that it ultimately did impact the game's sales. Despite all the marketing that this game got, Hi-Fi Rush seems to be performing better, at least on Steam, and this was reported by Benji Sales, who tweeted here Steam's global top sellers last week as of January 29th, 2023. And you can see right here that a lot of these slots are occupied by Dead Space because different editions are treated separately, but suffice to say that Dead Space is up there. Hogwarts Legacy pre-orders are off the charts. Steam Deck's still doing really well. Hi-Fi Rush, despite not getting any marketing whatsoever, made it to number 8 on the list. Meanwhile, Forspoken never made it to the top 10 on the week that it was launched, despite all of the marketing that it got. Hi-Fi Rush, no marketing, shadow dropped, word of mouth spread because the quality of the game spoke for itself, and it's been actually making a decent amount of money. Benji Sales made it a point to highlight that this top sellers list is based on revenue. Very impressed by Hi-Fi Rush as this chart is ranked by revenue, and Hi-Fi Rush is only $30 compared to Forspoken's $70 on Steam. So even though Hi-Fi Rush has to sell a little more than twice the units of Forspoken to be able to achieve the same revenue, it's still beating out Forspoken in revenue, which may very well go to suggest that Hi-Fi Rush is just selling that much better compared to Forspoken. You can see right here the mixed reviews from people who've played the game. 58% not particularly positive impressions, which is a stark contrast to Hi-Fi Rush, which is not only just $30, $40 if you want to get the deluxe edition. The deluxe edition of this game is cheaper than Forspoken's base version. You look at the user reviews and it's overwhelmingly positive at a whopping 98% from almost 4,000 reviews. And it's worth noting that despite Forspoken having come out a day earlier than Hi-Fi Rush did, with all that marketing, it's only got 2,398 reviews versus Hi-Fi Rush, which already has almost 4,000 reviews. It seems like a lot more people have engaged with Hi-Fi Rush and are more enthused to talk about it. And despite this disparity of marketing prowess and price point, Hi-Fi Rush at $30 actually made more revenue at launch week than Forspoken did at $70. Pretty shocking, especially with a shadow drop. And in terms of profit, I expect that Hi-Fi Rush will eclipse Forspoken because it looks like a lower budget game compared to Forspoken. And on top of that, there was no marketing budget behind Hi-Fi Rush. In general, a lot more money was spent on Forspoken, and Forspoken is the one that's trailing behind when it comes to revenue. And I imagine that the disparity of profit margins are significantly greater given that Hi-Fi Rush made more money and cost less to make and market. This is actually unprecedented. It's very rare for a single-player game that has been shadow dropped to gain this kind of traction. Now, to be fair, Hi-Fi Rush was developed by a well-known studio, Tango Gameworks, and was published by well-known companies, Bethesda Softworks and Microsoft, and with Xbox's backing through that direct presentation, Hi-Fi Rush did get a lot of eyes drawn to it. Like, I wouldn't recommend indie developers to shadow drop their games when there are unknown quantities, you know what I mean? But the buzz of a shadow dropped game won't last unless the quality really does speak for itself, and Hi-Fi Rush has really been blowing a lot of people away. A lot of people are calling it not only Game of the Year contender, but one of their favorite games, period. And it might not necessarily be for everyone. Not everyone is musically inclined or are able to both juggle the action combat with the rhythm aspect of the game, but even those folks who maybe this game wasn't tailored for can't deny that there's definitely something really cool and interesting and unique and high quality and fun here. And that really goes to highlight what happens when publishers let developers really push their imagination and really come up with something unique that is outside the box, that isn't chasing trends, but rather really just inspired by genuine passion and creative drive. It's stuff like that that makes for exciting and unique experiences that people cannot stop talking about, and that's the difference between Hi-Fi Rush, a unique game that was shadow dropped, versus Forspoken, a generic game that was heavily marketed. And look, I was rooting for Forspoken since it was first announced. I thought it had a lot of cool ideas going for it, but having played the demos and having played a small portion of the final game, it's really just not grabbing me. I do want to delve more into Forspoken and eventually share my thoughts through a separate video, but Hi-Fi Rush is the game that's really gotten my attention and has been a genuine highlight of January 2023 and a genuine highlight for 2023 as a whole. It is in my Game of the Year contender list already, alongside also Dead Space Remake, which also came out in January. January was a great way to kickstart 2023, honestly, but Hi-Fi Rush just came so out of the blue, out of nowhere. It was so unexpected in the way it was released and shadow dropped, and so unexpected in how much I ended up loving it and how high quality it is and just how fun and creative it is, that, I don't know, I'm taken aback, and I just want to give Hi-Fi Rush kudos, and hopefully, once I'm fully done with the game, I can talk about it in a separate video as well. But I'm just really enthused by releases like Hi-Fi Rush. I hope we get to see more projects like this. And this is also the first time in a long time that an Xbox first-party game release has garnered this much positivity, and hopefully that's something that Xbox can keep going, because 2022 was a downer of a year for Xbox, but hopefully with their upcoming releases, they can get their stuff together and really ensure that high-quality releases for their games are consistent. But Hi-Fi Rush is, a pleasant, very, very pleasant surprise that really kicked off the year right. So, we'll see where Xbox goes from here. But in the meantime, just judging Hi-Fi Rush by its own merits, I'd say that it achieving top 10 in the top sellers chart for Steam during the week that the game launched is absolutely well deserved, and I'm glad to see that the quality of this game really is resonating with a lot of people. It honestly doesn't surprise me that Hi-Fi Rush is overtaking Forspoken on Steam, at least when it comes to revenue, because there is such a disparity in quality between the two, and people will gravitate towards high-quality games. So hopefully successes like Hi-Fi Rush will inspire other publishers and developers to kind of go a little outside the box, because that's when you really get a product, a game that jolts the entire games industry and landscape back to life. These kinds of games both invigorate gaming as a whole and are also very much viable as business ventures that can prove to be very successful. I foresee Hi-Fi Rush not only getting game sequels, but I think branching off into other mediums. There is a potential here for this to become a major IP, I think. But yeah, it's fascinating to see this contrast of two very differently released games and that were marketed in very different ways, as in one was marketed heavily and one not at all. But quality above all else is what comes out on top. If a game is just compelling and something people can't help but talk about and spread to their cohorts and their colleagues. That's the best form of marketing, a compelling gaming experience just being able to speak for itself. Or at least that's one man's take. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on Hi-Fi Rush and or Forspoken, if you've played them, and what you think about these recent sales stats shared about Hi-Fi Rush and Forspoken and the contrast that's at display. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.